instructive and helpful. So let's talk about monologues. So the first thing is, I don't believe there's such a thing as a monologue. So that kind of, and there's the webinar. Thanks, people. I don't really buy into the whole concept of monologue, and monologue itself, the word, gives me the shivers. As a longtime New York stage actor, I start to hear the word monologue and I start to get like palpitations and my heart starts going and I get a little sweaty and my eyes dilate, because there's a concept of like, oh my gosh, I'm all alone out there and I have to perform. And as soon as I start thinking about performance, I start getting anxiety and insecurity, and then I get worried about I have to like deliver this thing. I know most acting teachers say this, and it's because it's true. There's no such thing as a monologue. A monologue is a dialogue in which one person happens to be behaving through vocality, and the other recipients are behaving through physicality. There's to backtrack. There's 3 ways for a human being to communicate. There's vocal, there's behavioral, and then there's silence. And those three tools are equally important and useful. For example, my favorite example, but am I allowed to use that on a webinar? Nah, children don't watch this. Is the line of dialogue can be "fuck you." So sorry about this, Martin, but I go "fuck you." And my dialogue, I know, thanks. Well, you want to do it to you, Linda? I go, I'm doing Mamet. I'm quoting Mamet, his great play, "Fuck You." And I go, "Fuck you." And that's the dialogue, Matthew, F-U-C-K-Y-O-U, exclamation mark, right? In capital letters. And that's my dialogue. So I'm speaking, fuck you. But I can also go, I'm sorry, Jim. Sorry, Michelle. I can also go and behave, and I don't have to speak. So he gives him the finger. But it can also be a silence. It can be, Martin, dude, let's go. Matthew, silence. And I go, and that's a fuck you too. So you can speak it, you can behave it, or you can do nothing and speak it, And sorry, now that you're 3-year-olds, oh, that's nice, Mr. Matthew. We do that on the island. I love that. Instead of, because if anybody calls me Mr. Harrison, I start to freak out. Like, I'd like when I was younger and I'd say, "Oh, Mr. Armstrong," and Mr. Armstrong would go, "I'm not my father." And I go, "What's wrong with Mr. Armstrong? Why does he say that?" Now people like Mr. Harrison, I'm like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! I'm not my dad." So I understand that now. But also like calling people by the first name seems a little bit casual. Like there should be a little bit of respect or something. So Mr. Matthew, I love it. Maybe that's what we're just going to call these now, the Friday morning webinars with Mr. Matthew. The idea of the 3 ways of communicating can also be, I love you. So I can say, I love you. I can go, or something to physically show that I love you. Or I can turn to my wife and she says, honey, and I just look at her. And you go, oh, he loves her. And so you can communicate through those 3 things. Therefore, a monologue is, I have a moment, you have a moment, realization, decision. I realize, I decide, you realize, you decide, I realize, I decide, you realize, you decide. And we're going back and forward. It just happens to be that I'm speaking in my moments and you're silent in your moments. And that's what we call my monologue. So a monologue is not a monologue. It's a dialogue in which only one person is speaking. And that takes the onus off of, oh my gosh, I have a monologue and I need to perform. And it becomes, no, this is a communication between 2 people. And we're going to talk about the various forms of monologues. So if I'm doing a monologue, utmost importance is that I'm working out who I'm speaking to, whether it's a group of people or one person or myself. Those are the 3 kinds of monologues, by the way. There's the speech, there's the I'm speaking in the middle of a scene, and then there's the soliloquy. Who am I speaking to? And then what are the realizations and decisions that I'm getting off of the unspeaking person, even if I'm speaking to a spot on the wall or my own self-conscious or my own subconscious, like not self-conscious, subconscious. Who am I speaking to and what am I getting from them? And that's what causes the monologue in me. So we'll discuss that. But in the end, what I've just basically said is that monologues aren't monologues, they're just scenes. So they break down the same as any other scene. But that is true for everything. And that's because scene analysis is not endemic only to scene analysis. Scene analysis is the construction or architecture of narrative, which is how human beings see the world. So and this is super important. There's actually an actress who was auditing last night, and I really wish I'll have to send this to her. That it's not like Shakespeare or Joseph Campbell or Robert McKee sat down and made decisions about how scene analysis works. It's human beings genetically are encoded to see the world a certain way, and those people, actually, I'm naming the great people, have been the ones who've been slowly decoding how is it that we see the world. So I was just listening to Paul Simon this morning because I love Paul Simon, and every single song is a 3-act structure with an A and a B conversation and an arc and a shift, and it either builds or devolves over its 3-act structure. And every single song, you grab any Paul Simon song and you go, there it is, there it is, there it is. I'm sure I was eavesdropping while I was finishing my breakfast, and I heard we're talking about La Dimanche sur le Grand Chat by Georges Seurat, right? And it's if you, Jim, you haven't heard it, I'm just gonna have to play it again. I played it like every class every day because I'm shocked by it. So, and there's also an interview with Jake Gyllenhaal by Stephen Colbert that came out like 2 days ago. You should watch it; it's really good. But that piece of music by Sondheim is in a 3-act structure with 2 conversations, and she's shifting him. And sometimes the song is a duet, which is dialogue, and sometimes it's a solo singer, which is still a dialogue. It just happens to be a monologue, so it's the same thing. The painting itself is in a 3-act structure, and if you pay close attention, there's 2 conversations going on. One is nature versus overpopulation, and then you are listening to a piece of classical music, you're having a conversation with your friend. No matter what it is, there's a piece of poetry. It all breaks down the same way. So the question, do monologues break down the same way as scenes, is kind of actually funny. Like I go, yeah, because it's like saying, like, listen, I know water's made of molecules, but is air made of molecules? You're like, yes. So, but that doesn't change the concept that we do approach monologues with a different little paintbrush, and that's important because it is a lot harder because there's no necessarily recipient, and so you actually have to work a lot at building the other side of the scene. Yes, we're going to talk about that. So in order to build your realizations and decisions, one of the most important tools in monologue work is the implied cue work, where you're actually creating the other side, the non-spoken dialogue. You're looking at the behavior. It's not absolutely necessary, but it is a really, really good process, and I always use it. Well, okay, so let's get to the work. There's I guess there's 3 categories of monologues. I've never really said it this way, but to me, there's the dialogue inside of a scene, in which I'm in a scene with someone, and it happens to be I'm the only one speaking for this 2 minutes, and so it's the continuation of a scene, and I'm the one speaking. And there's nothing more annoying than an actor who is anticipating, the actor's in the actor head, they're in their system 2 head, and they're anticipating the fact that their monologue is coming. And you can hear it. You can hear and now it's his monologue. And you're like, no, a really great monologue, you don't even realize it's a monologue until if you stop and thought about it, go, oh, that's funny. Only Merritt Wever was speaking in that scene. That was a monologue. Or you don't even realize it's a monologue until you read the script and you go, holy shit, there's 2 pages of only her talking. Monologue, right? But you can feel it sometimes, like in acting class and occasionally on television, where the actor goes, and now's my monologue. Yeah, and so that's not how it works. So the first category is it's a scene between 2 people and I happen to be the one speaking and you're not. I think the second kind of category of monologue is, and then inside of that, by the way, or probably across all 3, are different types of traps, because there's different types of monologues, like why people are speaking. So I'll come to that in a second. The second one would be the speech. And so the all-time best wedding speech in film, anybody? The all-time best wedding speech in film is, come on now. I mean, there's lots of great ones, but the all-time best. Oh no, we're doing that one today. That's the all-time worst. We're doing Rachel Getting Married, Kim's destructo speech. We're going to actually do that. I'm going to look at that in a second. But I think the best wedding speech ever is Hugh Grant's speech in Four Weddings and a Funeral. The let's get back to the sheep speech. Like, that's absolutely wonderful. It's a 3x structure, perfect 3x structure with an A and a B and a rim shot at the end, which is actually a monologue that I want to look at today from stage. What he's doing is he's saying, he gets up and he makes he's doing his wedding speech. He's the best man. I don't know if you guys have seen it. We should watch that. I should have queued that one up. And basically the first part is, I'm going to divulge all this horrible stuff that he did when he was single before he was ever with his girlfriend, who's now his wife. And I've got so many things to say, and it's going to be horrible. And I think you'll never talk to me again. I got this one anecdote that's really great. And so he sets up, I got this like dirty thing to talk about the groom. And then he stops himself and goes into the second act. And he goes, but before I go there, I just want to say, and then he actually does a whole talk on love and how courageous it is and how he doesn't have that courage. And when he sees it in two people like them, how moving it is to him and how it cuts him to the soul and he wishes he could have it, you know? And it's this beautiful speech and everybody starts to almost cry. And then he goes, anyway, let's go back to Angus, the name of the groom's Angus. Let's go back to my story about Angus and the sheep. And everyone breaks out laughing, and that's the end of the speech. It's perfect because it says this like 1, 2, 3, right? The other wedding speech one is Benedict Cumberbatch in Sherlock, in like the 3rd season of Sherlock. Unbelievable. Anyway, so there's the speech. And so there's lots of versions of the speech. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. All three show up in Shakespeare, by the way. Let us sit down and talk about the death of kings is a dialogue that the king, Richard II, happens to be the only one speaking. Or Timon sits down and he talks about, the idea of death, and he's having a speech, or Jack Lee's speech, All the World's a Stage, he's speaking, it's a monologue within a scene. Then there's the speech, I'm talking to a crowd of people. And I think the most famous in recent years is Jeff Daniels in The Newsroom, which we're gonna watch a little bit of. In Her Shoes has great monologues, well done. One of the, it's funny to say this because I'm not the hugest fan of this actress, but one of the best monologue speeches that's ever, like an absolute slam dunk. It's so moving. We could watch that too. Is Meg Ryan in When a Man Loves a Woman, and it's her doing her AA speech, where she's getting her chip, and she's doing her confession about how she, it's the wrap up of the whole movie. So there's those kind of speeches. The one that if you look on the at the very end of the movie, she's magnificent. Meg Ryan's magnificent in that speech, and it's a one taker, and she's absolutely heartbreaking. So you got the speech. If you go to the assignments page, I break down a monologue. We should probably look at it from the 100 television show. And it's a very tiny little monologue, but it's a speech to the crowd. And I'm teaching how to break that down and do it. Yes, Martin did a fantastic version of that. You should bring that up. He did a really good version of it. Better than the show. So that's the speech. So we've got the scene, and then we've got the speech. And then the last one, of course, is the soliloquy, where you're alone talking to yourself. Now that's the hardest, of course. It doesn't show up in film very often, but it does. And one of the best versions of that is John Cusack in, oh no, what's the movie? Come on, he's single and he's breaking up with his girlfriend. He owns the record shop, High Fidelity. Boom! In High Fidelity, the whole movie is the switches in the movie, the architecture of the movie is that we keep going back to, he's looking right in the camera and he's talking. And it's like, okay, so who's he talking to? It's a soliloquy, right? Of course, To Be or Not to Be is the most famous soliloquy of all time. And that's when you're talking to yourself out loud. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in its petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time. So then the question becomes, how the hell do you deliver that? Like, who are you delivering it to? It doesn't happen particularly often in film. Any other film examples of that? Because there are quite a few where the, yes, soliloquy itself, there could be an entire monologue on, how do you spell soliloquy? That'd be very funny. That's a little meta joke. You're like, soliloquy. That's one spell, soliloquy. I think that was an iambic pentameter. So any other examples you can find from film and TV would be great. I'd love to think of them. Yes, Star Trek does use the cat monologues for them. Yes. Well, we're going to talk about that, Linda. That's a very, very good question. Thank you. The soliloquy ends up being misunderstood, I think, in the world of Shakespeare. It offends me beyond a belief. I'm trying to no end. I'm trying to paraphrase Hamlet. When an actor stands on stage and talks to himself, I think it's a complete mistake. And I saw Ralph Fiennes butcher Hamlet on stage on Broadway like 25 years ago. Because when he was in the scenes, he was magnificent. But when he was doing his soliloquies, he would completely disappear. And it's because it was very self-conscious, self-involved stuff, and there's no room for us. And it doesn't work because the Shakespeare's concept was that the audience was your self-conscious, subconscious. My God, there's an egoistic Freudian thing going on there. It's your subconscious. It's your other self. It's part of who you are. It's you working it out with yourself. And I love Jake Gyllenhaal was being interviewed. I just watched it, and he actually at one point goes, "Yeah, and that thing that actors do that you shouldn't do anymore. That thing what's it called? The fourth wall." It was so great that Jake Gyllenhaal doesn't believe in the fourth wall, because the fourth wall does not exist. The fourth wall has been blown up for the last 30 years, and anybody who's still teaching the fourth wall is living in 1950, and they should grow up. Arthur Miller is dead, and his work is stale. The concept of having a fourth wall, all that does is ostracizes the audience, and then the audience now become like weird kind of peeping Tom viewers. They're not involved in it. Whereas in theater, up until that idea crept into our world, which is probably the late 1800s, is theater supposed to be the audience is there. You don't pretend the audience is not there. The audience is there. If you're pretending there's not 500 people in front of you, you've lost your mind. If you pretend there's a camera not in front of you, you've lost your mind. And if you ignore the camera, what you're doing is you're giving the camera credence. You're giving it power. The camera is just not important. The camera there's a lamp right there. Or there's like my son has a map sitting on that table. I don't pay any attention to it when I'm talking to you. You're important. So I don't ignore it. I just don't worry about it. But when it comes to an audience, and the camera, the reason why a guy like Damian Lewis or Mark Rylance or Benedict Cumberbatch, those are all Brits. No, Damian Lewis is Aussie, right? Where's he from? He's Irish, doesn't matter. More Jake Gyllenhaal or Kate Blanchett or Toni Collette. The reason why they're so great is because they have so much experience with working with an audience that they understand that the audience is actually feeding them. The camera is actually feeding them. So there's a difference between somebody who's aware of the camera and trying to ignore it, somebody who just doesn't worry about the camera, and somebody who lets the camera in and it becomes part of their subconscious texture. When you're on stage, the audience is your subconscious. It is your other self. It is an integral part of your whole, and you're arguing with it. So when you reach out to the audience and you go, to be or not to be, that is the question. You're talking to the audience because the audience is part of you. A soliloquy is supposed to be with the audience. And it shocks a modern audience because they're not used to having to be that involved. But when the actor gets on their knees, looks up to the audience and speaks to them, help me figure this out. So that's the third kind. So I think it's scene where I happen to be the one talking, speech, and soliloquy. Now inside of that becomes, and all three of those, therefore, have a very specific outward objective, vectored out objective. It's about the action or the intention is to change the audience. In the speech and in the scene, clearly I have a scene objective. There's two conversations, and I'm trying to affect change in the person somehow. In the speech, I'm trying to do something to the audience, obviously. And in the soliloquy, I'm attempting to get the audience to figure out an answer for me, to help me resolve an issue, to work something out. So it's always outwards. You never have the I'm going to ruminate thing, you know. Yes, you're hearing correctly. The soliloquy is about teaching the audience, but it depends on the soliloquy, of course. But if all the world's a stage, that's actually type one. He's actually talking to the audience. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day. Macbeth is trying to work out is this worth it? What is life? Do I just want to die? Why am I doing these things? Who am I? Where do I exist in the great scheme of things? You know, his wife just committed suicide. He's falling apart, and he goes, you know, maybe I just don't matter. And he's working that out with the audience. So he's teaching the audience in order to then enlighten himself. To be or not to be is an actual, can you help me with this question I have? You know? You're exactly right, Jim. He's out fooling the fool. Yeah. Actually, I have the 7 Stages of Man speech by Benedict Cumberbatch. It's very, very edited, but it's a very exciting bit of camera work. So we're going to take a look at that too. Okay, now the number one thing you do when you have a monologue is you go, of course, what is going on? What is this about? Why does this exist? So let's look at the A and the B, and let's look at the 2 conversations, and let's work out, like, why am I doing this? And therefore, what is my objective, my character's objective? And if you're in a scene where we're going to watch a scene from Unbelievable, where the 2 cops are talking and she's trying to affect the other cop, easy peasy. It's the same as any scene analysis. It just happens to be, you know, the other person's not talking. And if you're filming it or you're auditioning it, easy peasy. Stick a reader in front of you and do it. If you have to do some kind of theater audition where you're looking at a splotch on the wall, you're looking at a spot, which is irritating, but sometimes that's just what you need to do. It becomes much easier to imagine, because you go, okay, I get it. I know who I'm speaking to. She's the one who is my mentor, but is starting to fall apart and not take this seriously. And I need to reignite her passion. And I understand that the mentor who's getting lazy, because I have that image in my head, and I just do all my homework, and then I imagine that the life is that person. So that's actually easier because it's scene analysis. The speech one gets a little tougher, because you start going, okay, who are these people and what do they mean to me? And when we look at Rachel getting married, there's different people in the audience, and there's different kinds of people, and they have different relationships to you. So the whole, you know, friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. They're the you know, the rabble, the non-thinking plebes who are easily converted, and I need to dangle carrots in front of them in order to turn them against the murderers and conspirators against Julius Caesar. So I've got this point of view, and I can figure out, and then I have to figure out what that means to me. But there's still a relationship, right, between the A and the B, those characters and me. Now, sometimes in a speech, like in the newsroom speech, it's a speech that also has a soliloquy feel to it. So now we're starting to move towards the third thing, which is I'm actually giving a speech, but in a lot of ways, I'm really talking to myself. So now we have to go, okay, shit, I got to work these things out. Who are the 3 people that are the co-hosts of the show? What is the audience? What does America need? But what am I trying to say to myself? Like, what am I trying to do with myself? And so there's a point counterpoint. And there's a moment in Newsroom, which I think is one of the best moments in film history, which I know most people would miss, but it's just that I'm an obsessive acting teacher, where he's speaking and he stops and he goes, huh. And then he continues. And it's because he has a realization of, holy fuck, I'm talking about myself. I'm talking to myself about my own fear. And so his counterpoint is that the point is over here, I have a point and counterpoint, right? Which is whatever the A and the B of the scene is, but I'm doing something to that person. Over here, I'm doing a speech, but there's actually a counterpoint often inside, which is my own kind of soliloquy. And then over here, it's my soliloquy. So then in the third, when I'm doing a soliloquy to myself and I'm talking to myself, that one becomes much harder. Then you start going, who am I speaking to? Like, who is this part of me that I need to speak to? And you need to have an image for it. Number one in a monologue is always make sure you know very clearly who you're speaking to. That's like the number one. And Linda was saying, asking in a, sorry, 1 second. I just have to let my dog in. Okay. Yeah, so the number one mistake that actors make when they're auditioning or filming monologues is that who they're speaking to is not clear. And I'm posting slowly the 15 finalists for the monologues for the Brave, but if you pay close attention to those ones, they're always viciously specific. It's so clear who they're speaking to. uh, Eric Gustafson did the speech from Patch Adams. That's a speech. And then a lot of them are like nurses talking in a scene, you know? And there was one finalist where she's talking to herself. So we have examples of all three. But it's very, very, very specific about to whom are you speaking. Okay, good. Now, there's a trap in some monologues, which I want to talk about in this very first one we're going to look at, is sometimes monologues are retrospective. They're memory monologues. Memory monologues are extremely difficult to perform. All actors should practice on them. I just realized I had to talk about something else over here in the soliloquy thing. The traps, the difficulties in monologues, the things that you have to go, oh, this is different than most scenes, is that, you know, if you and I are going back and forward discussing, remember that time when we were, no way, yeah, that's right, and we're in some bad exposition where we have to like get out the fact that we're both in jail at one point. And I don't know why I'm laughing with that. But, you know, and we're having this like, this memory recall to teach the audience something about us. We can work on that as actors to make that, why is this exposition active and why is it exciting and why is it fun to work with each other? And it becomes easier because I'm actually working out with somebody. It's still bad writing, but I gotta make it work. But sometimes you get those, you know, it reminds me when I was living in Georgia and monologue. And it's just like, oh my God. And it's like a backstory monologue, right? Sometimes that's the one we're going to watch is good writing. Sometimes that's bad writing because all it is one of the drafts, the producers were like, okay, listen, we need to understand that he lived in Georgia. Like nowhere in the film is there ever reference that he lived in Georgia. And you just drop in that in scene 82. So we need a monologue where he talks about he's being in Georgia. So the writer just writes this monologue and it gets jumped into a scene. And you can smell those, right? Remember the time when you and I lived in Georgia, Jim? Remember that? That was what, 1998? Yeah, and you were married to Linda at that time. Remember that? And you drove the red Corvette, which we're gonna see in scene 32 in that photo. And it's just like, oh my God. And so it's this like memory monologue. Those are death. And to answer Linda's question, if you're choosing monologue for an audition, you should try to avoid those. However, when you're practicing as an actor and you're trying to study as an actor, you should jump on those because they're really difficult to do. So the first thing is, who are you talking to? Make sure you know who you're talking to. That can slip from your, so to summarize back to where I'm going, the analysis is identical between a scene and a monologue, identical. But depending on the monologue and what form of monologue it is, the analysis can slip from underneath you because it's not clear. So the first one is make sure you know who you're talking to. But the second thing is make sure you know why you're talking. Now this is relationships and objectives as part of the core of your understanding. But a lot of time actors forget, like, why am I discussing this time I was in jail in Georgia? By the way, I actually did spend time in jail in Georgia, but that's a private talk for another time. It's a good story, Jim. I'll tell you one time. Yes, I was 19. It's okay. No, I wasn't. I was like 24. Anyway, it's fine. It's on the public record. So you go into like, why am I talking about this history? Like, why am I talking about this history? And it has to be an active, intentional reason. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because I need you to change. I need to make sure I'm affecting a change in you. I'm not just reminiscing. To reminisce is death to an actor. Listen, what's the other word? To when something ruminates, reminisce, there's another R word. To reflect. Those are death words to an actor. Someone write that down. I got to write that down later. Ruminate, reminisce, and reflecting are death to an actor. Because as soon as you start going, oh, I'm reminiscing. Oh man, I missed you disappear on camera. You disappear to the audience. And the reason is because if you have an Uncle John who just likes to reminisce, don't you notice how boring he is? You're just like, oh my God, Uncle John's talking about that time with his kayak again. I can't deal with this. And you lose track of him, right? Because that's all about him. But scenes are not designed around that way. Scenes are designed around, I'm trying to affect you and there's gonna be an event and a change. We don't film scenes where nothing happens. We film scenes where there's a happening. And that means there has to be a change involved. So if a character is reminiscing, they're not just reminiscing. they're attempting to either affect the person in front of them by teaching them something, which is what we're going to see in Merit Weavers. I'm talking about something in the past because I'm trying to teach you something in the now. Or if it's the second kind, I'm reminiscing to the group because I'm telling an anecdote which is going to lighten their load, make them laugh, attempt to teach them something about life. You know, listen, don't speed at 110 miles an hour over a toll bridge at 3 a.m. in front of a Georgian policeman. Don't do it. And here, I'll tell you why, right? I can tell you a story, and the story is to affect change in my audience. Or if it's a soliloquy, I'm reminding myself, I'm reminiscing about this time when I was with something, but it's because I'm trying to affect change in me. I'm trying to soothe myself, or I'm trying to get back to my happy place, or I'm beating myself up for that thing that I did. It's still, I'm affecting change in someone, either the person, the audience, the audience that's receiving the speech, or that other part of myself. But no one actually just reflects. If you're just reflecting or reminiscing, or what was my third word? Reflect, reminisce, and ruminate. Those are internal, and you're shut down. And in the real world, people don't. You'll catch somebody on the bus, and they're reflecting on something, but they're fascinating. And it's because they're reflecting with themselves. They're working something out with themselves. So they're doing a soliloquy in which they're just not speaking. You understand? Yeah, but that's great. You're being funny, Monty, but that's great. If the monologue is about how boring Uncle Jed is when he tells his stories, you're going to portray how boring he is because you're trying to teach the audience, whoever you're speaking to not tell boring stories like Uncle Jed, which ends up being ironically interesting. So you're still portraying that in order to do something to the audience, you know? That's a kind of a funny quirk, but there is an answer to it. When you're ruminating, when you're reflecting, when your character is reminiscing, they're not. It's something about change. You're still trying to change something in you. Yeah, I can film Scarlett Johansson looking out over a view, not saying anything, and she's just reflecting on something, and the camera goes because it's not. Scarlett Johansson is looking at the view, and it's paining her. It's killing her to have to say goodbye to it because this was her father's view, and the father's now dying, and she needs to. And there's still something happening inside her. She's doing something. I don't think it's humanly possible to stand and simply reflect. So make sure that it's active. So number one in your monologue is make sure you know who you're talking to. Number two is make sure that you know why you're saying it, you know. Good. And then the last thing is make sure that the monologue is being caused by the other. The other person is causing it. So it's not just to be or not to be, that is the question. It's to be, I realize I affected you, you responded, that allows me to go to my next moment, to not be, which I realize, right? Jim, unmute yourself for a second. And then I want you to say, I say to be, and then you say, or what? Okay. And then I say to not be, and then you ask me, what is that? And this is how it works. I go, okay, I need to teach Jim the excruciating truth of existence, which is life is pain and isn't really worth living. And the only question is this worth it? So I'm going to, so that he can tell me whether or not I'm allowed to murder myself today. Because the speech, to be or not to be, is a suicide speech. He's working out, should I kill myself? And so I set the premise. So I lay down Jim's table to be.
Or what?
So now I realize that I've got him and I've pulled him along the chain. So now I'm going to negate what I just said and put him in a completely different direction, or not to be.
What is that?
I just realized that he is hook, line, and sinker coming in. So now I'm going to smash the truth right into him. That is the question. So
Can you give an example?
Nice, dude. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune.
Or what?
Or to take arms against a siege of troubles, and by opposing, end them.
I don't know how to prompt to die to sleep. I'm sorry.
To be or not to be. It's realization, decision, realization, decision, realization, decision. And so let's do it again now, and I'll take my R&Ds out, but do your dialogue. I go to be.
Or what?
Or not to be.
Yeah, what is that?
That is the question.
Can you
And
give an
now
example?
I take Jim out, but I look at Jim and I try to find it. And I go, to be or not to be. That is the question. And now I take Jim out completely. I look at myself, I look into myself, I try to find it. I look out to the audience and I say, to be or not to be. That is the question. And it becomes active because I'm playing off of the realizations and decisions of my imaginary self, crowd, or other character, right? That's what monologue is. So monologue, I think the three major things that people drop when they're doing a monologue is they forget, who am I talking to? Why am I saying it? And then what am I working off of? Because in a scene, when it's like, you speak, I speak, you speak, I speak, you speak, I speak, you speak, I speak, who I'm speaking to, why I'm speaking, and what I'm getting from you is right there. I don't have to work. In a monologue, you start to go, okay, I gotta make this work for me, right? We can go backwards or forwards with that. Now I'm excited by that, so I'm going to show you an example of the soliloquy and the moments. Oh, hang on, I gotta make sure when you share with Zoom, make sure you optimize the screen and share the computer sound. Okay, watch his realizations and decisions that happen off of you. Like Damian Lewis is talking to you. So in that soliloquy, in that speech, that's a speech to the crowd, right? So we're in section 2 of the monologues. Can you see the 3-act structure? Can you see his use of the word honorable and how it goes from truthful to sarcastic to an attack, and his pretend respect for Brutus, and then his use of brutish men, and then he's turning the crowd against Brutus, and then his allowing for himself to be emotional so that he can turn the crowd against the killers of Caesar. Like, it's just so clear in its 3-act structure. Yes. Yeah, I think he's absolutely amazing, yeah. What else do I have open here on my computer? I have 50,000 monologues I wanted to show, but my all-time favorite actor is here. Benedict Cumberbatch, this is a weird little scene I just kind of like. It's not really such a great example for monologue because it's edited and things. But Benedict Cumberbatch has an unbelievable way of speaking right to you.
All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances. And one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. At first, the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms. And then the whining schoolboy, with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like snail unwillingly to school. And then the lover, sighing like furnace with a woeful ballad made to his mistress' eyebrow. Then a soldier, full of strange oaths, and bearded like the pard, jealous in honor, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation even in the cannon's mouth. And then the justice, in fair round belly with good cape and line, with eyes severe and beard of formal cut, full of wise saws and modern instances. And so he plays his part. The 6th age shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon with spectacles on nose and pouch on side. His youthful hose, well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank. And his big, manly voice, turning again towards childish treble, pipes and whistles in his sound. Last scene of all that ends this strange, eventful history is second childishness and mere oblivion. Sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything.
It's pretty cool, actually. Eh? It's kind of neat. As a Benedict Cumberbatch fan, it's a total turn on because it's like a retrospective of his entire career as well. The thing about Cumberbatch is that when he looks into the camera and speaks, there's several examples you can find, he's unbelievably good at turning the lens into a very specific active recipient of the monologue, and he's working with the lens. The majority of actors, I'm going to say this and it's totally offensive and I apologize, but the majority of actors absolutely suck at getting their headshots done. And their headshots are vapid and shut down and worried, and it's because they're not turning the lens into an active player. You're not actually speaking to somebody for a reason and making a relationship with the lens. And Cumberbatch is able to look through that lens and then reach right into your soul and pluck you. That's another very, very important part of. Oh wow. Yeah, I find that speech chilling, and I mean, the majority of Shakespeare's speeches are about, we're all going to die. Time, the great enemy. Now, let's discuss. I was going to show you an example of a monologue where you actually have a lot of troubles, because in this one, it's the classic theater monologue where the other person's not speaking. So it's a lot like the telephone conversation. And if anyone's ever done telephone conversations on stage or film, but on film and television, like I was saying this last night in my class, but you can really tell who has worked hard in theater and theater monologues when they're acting in film on a TV call, on a phone call on television, and the actors that have never done film and stage and they're trying to do a phone call on television. Because the film TV actors tend to suck on the fake phone call, but the theater actors can hear the voice, have set it up the implied cue, So the whole like, yeah, what? No, right? Oh, dude, I don't think I can, and you can feel that oh my gosh, what's going on here? That the actor has worked out the implied dialogue, who they're talking to, why they're talking, the responses, There's like, in Oleana, the poor actress play Oleana has those like endless phone calls that are, I, no, what? She, Lou, what? No. Like, it's like this monologue of just like responses to a phone conversation. So you got to work out the entire conversation. So when an actor has a phone call conversation in a scene or a film, I'm like, listen, what you don't want is you don't want the first AD saying those lines off camera, because it's going to be terrible acting and it won't work. And they can't do it anyway because they can't have an overlap on the audio. And they don't phone in and have Mel Gibson talking to you on the phone. You have to act it, right? So the first thing you do is you write out the entire other conversation. You write out their lines, and you make it, based on the script and the scene and what you're pretty damn sure that the other character is saying, you actually write out the phone conversation. And then I take that, I hand it to Jim, and I say, Jim, can you run this conversation with me? And we run it, and we run it, and we run it, and I break it down like a scene, and I do my A's and my B's, my 3-act structure, and I break down the scene, which is actually half made up, because we're just kind of guessing at what was usually really implied in the scene, what Jim has been saying. So just like our to be or not to be implied cues that we did earlier, Jim and I are actually going to write out a scene for the phone conversation. And then what I do is I've practiced it, and I can hear it, and I know it, and I've worked on my R&Ds, and then I just imagine that I hear it. And an actor who's worked hard on that can actually hear it and actually respond to a conversation that doesn't exist. Film and TV actors tend to have a harder time because they don't usually have to do that, as opposed to a theater actor who has to do it all the time. So many monologues in theater are you're standing there and you're responding to something that's not being said. For example, this one, which is from Gimme Shelter, Wendy Weiner's Gimme Shelter. Ned goes, hey, come on in, I'm Ned. So you're a friend of Tapio's? Oh, Jewel. Yeah, she's a great lady. Well, let me give you the tour. This is the bedroom, this hot pot is the kitchen, and this is the living room. Yeah, I measured it when I first moved in. It's roughly 6 feet by 9 feet by 7 feet. If you put a loft in there, that would be like a double space. Oh, the bathroom is in the hallway right down there. He's responding to a conversation that doesn't exist, and you got to stand on stage and imagine it. So in this case, you definitely have to do the implied cues, just like the phone conversation. But I would do implied cues even for to be or not to be, and I would do implied cues even for what we're going to end with, which is Merritt Weaver doing a scene. I would still put in the other person's behavioral responses vocalized so I can learn it. So do go look at the assignment on the assignments page for the 100. Jim, go for it. Unmute yourself. What was so interesting is my actor who's doing this this monologue completely misread the monologue because they were thinking of it as monologue, not thinking of it as dialogue. And the first thing you need to do is you have to go, what are the two conversations? In this scene, what he's doing is he's trying to put on a brave face and a positive spin on the fact that the apartment that he's showing in New York is a total piece of shit. Like, it's really, really a piece of shit apartment. But the thing is, in New York City, any apartment is fantastic, especially in the 1990s. Like, I lived in New York in the 90s, and it was just like, oh my God. I like walking to my friend's apartment. It's 200 square feet with a window that looks onto a wall. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's got 7,000 coats of white paint on it, and the bathroom doesn't flush. But I'm like, dude, this apartment's fantastic, you know? How much do you pay? And he's like, I pay $900 a month for it. I'm like, this is in the 90s. And I'm like, no way. How'd you get this apartment? Because, you know, you would, in the 90s, I'm sure it's still like that in New York, but in the 90s when I lived in New York, you would find a listing for an apartment, and it would say, come look at the apartment and try to meet the landlord. And you would get there 3 hours early, and there'd be a line of 60 people. And it's just like, it was impossible to get an apartment because it was like 110% unavailability or something. So he's trying to put on a brave face. So the scene is about, the monologue is about a guy trying to be positive and spin this apartment for this girl who might take it. But that's Act 1A, Act 1B, and Act 1C. And this is not my writing. This is actually from the script. So the authors actually put in 3-act structure in the paragraphs. Act 1A, Act 1B, Act 1C. And then in Act 2, which is this big paragraph, he falls apart. And then we find out what the counterpoint is. The counterpoint is he's not leaving the apartment because the apartment's a piece of shit. He's leaving New York because he can't handle New York anymore. It's destroying him. And then Act 3 is the punchline, in which he goes, it's like kind of like I was saying the 4 weddings and a funeral thing, where he goes, yeah, anyway, so you want the place? And we go back to the apartment. So it's about positive spin on an apartment, despite the fact that living in New York will kill you. That's what the monologue is, yeah? And then you've got to imagine that conversation with her, and then go down into yourself for the rage of the second act, and then come back to her, right? So it actually takes chops. You've really got to work on it. And my actor who's working on it right now in class is like, woo, he's hitting his head against it, because it seems so easy on the page, but it's not. But watch, Jim, you read it, and I'm going to give you your implied cues.
Hey.
Hi.
Come on in.
Thank you.
I'm Ned.
Hi, I'm Wendy.
So you're a friend of Tapo's?
Who? No, no. I'm a friend of Jules. Jules Hemming.
Oh, Jules, she's a great lady.
Yeah. So anyway,
well, let me give you the grand tour.
Thank you.
This is the bedroom.
Aha.
This hot pot is the kitchen.
Oh, okay.
And this is the living room.
Wow, it's really small.
Yeah, I measured it when I first moved in.
How is it?
It's roughly 6 feet by 9 feet by 7 feet.
Whoa, that is small.
And if you put a loft bed in, that would double the space.
But there's no bathroom.
Oh, the bathroom is in the hallway right down there.
You share the bathroom with other people?
Oh, you share it with the family on the other side of the hall.
A family.
They're very nice people. Every one of them.
Whoa, how big is this family?
I don't know. There's 6 of them. No, 7 with the new baby.
New baby? There's a newborn baby next door?
She was born right here in the building.
Oh my God.
Oh, baby Sally. Oh, and the terrace.
Okay. This is your terrace?
I covered this strip of tar with AstroTurf, and it's really killer.
Wow.
I hung out here all last summer, and as you can see, you have an excellent view of the alley.
Are there rats in the alley?
The rats are awesome.
The rats are awesome.
They're more like people than you think. There's families and gangs and sex stuff.
Keep going.
If you don't have a TV, you can definitely kill hours that way.
Okay, so I'm getting idea that you're leaving this apartment because it's a piece of shit apartment.
Oh no, I'm not leaving because of the apartment. It's been real great.
It's great? How's it great?
Having your own case in Manhattan is practically unheard of.
So you're not leaving because of the apartment?
No, I'm leaving for personal reasons.
Which personal reasons are those? Do you mind telling me?
Well, since you ask, last Thursday I had a moment of clarity.
Now, this time, now take out my implied cues and just go and vomit out your truth. I mean, you're cold reading, I know, Jim, but go for it.
Well, since you ask, last Thursday I had a moment of clarity. No Zone, our band, was playing at the Mercury Lounge, and we always end our sets with this song Tap wrote called Age of Rage. So I'm playing the rhythm. It's real constant, driving beat, you know? Like when you're angry and your heart's slamming against your chest, there's all this blood flowing through you, and you're starting to shake. You can't see. I don't know why, it was really getting to me, so after the set, I took off and I walked out onto Houston Street, but the beat was still there.
Now start losing your mind. New York City is destroying you. You're going
People
crazy.
pushing, horns honking, subway rushing all around, all to that same beat.
Now get angry. Go.
It's not a wonder people kill each other here. It's a wonder. I need you to scroll, Matthew.
Uh-oh. It's a wonder.
It's a wonder most of us are still alive.
Now take a second, breathe. And then you look up and she goes, I'm so sorry. What about the apartment?
Oh, the place. It's yours if you want it.
Yeah, that's great, Jim. That's already a great cold read on a very hard monologue, but well done. A conversation is positivity, you know, great apartment. B conversation is anxiety, losing my mind, suicide, New York is fucking killing me, I can't take New York. The joke of the scene is it's a shitty apartment, but for New York, it's great. Positive. I can't stand New York. The apartment's yours if you want. And that's the joke. The joke is you can have the apartment, but do you really want to live in New York? New York is hell, you know? Sorry about that, Bilal, who's from New York. But, you know, having lived in New York, it can be hell, right? That's the point of it. And so you can see the devolution of his positivity in the second act, which is this paragraph, where he just goes down into a hell. And in the first three paragraphs, he's trying his best to like keep it positive. It's like, yeah, this place is great. Yeah, okay, so there's a baby next door, but there's you know the rats are awesome, you know. And then he goes, I actually can't stand New York. New York is killing me. Anyway, would you like the apartment? Like that's the joke. So Act 1 is paragraph 1, 2, 3. Act 2 is paragraph 2, and Act 3 is bang. Oh, the place, it's yours if you want it, right? So then you go, who are you talking to? Break down that do the scene like we did the scene, write it out, work it with somebody, and then know exactly who you're talking to, figure out your objectives, your actions, all that kind of stuff, break down all the scripts in between, memorize it, and then act it, and imagine you're having a conversation with someone. That's how you'd approach that. So that's like a classic theater monologue where you're having to actually create the implied cues. Yeah, got that? Okay, good. Jim, you did a great job on a cold read. Very lovely. Very, very lovely. No, that's not what I need yet. So let's go back. Good. Karen and Grace are having a scene where the two cops are big time burnt out. They've been chasing a serial rapist for almost a year. Women are being raped, and they've been trying to stop them. If you've all seen Unbelievable, if you haven't, go see it. It's incredible. It's unbelievable. Merritt Weaver is amazing. We're doing the scene in my classes now because it's so good. Grace is the older cop, played by Toni Collette, who's got years behind her, and she's kind of lost her passion, and she knows she's doing her job, but she's also protecting herself. Karen is the younger cop who is sacrificing her family, her two children. She's never home with her two daughters because she's so busy trying to save the world from rapists. And it's a big sacrifice. And really a lot of the question of this scene and the script is at what cost your, cause. Grace is, as the older cop, is trying to say, hey, listen, you need to take care of yourself. So act one, she comes in and she says, hey, don't you have a couple of kids waiting to be tucked in? And Karen goes, Sitter already got them to sleep. And Grace nods. Karen's staring at this pickup truck file. And she goes, I knew this was something and I should have followed harder. And Grace goes, oh, okay, that's what time this is, self-flagellation o'clock. Like, I had a feeling and I didn't listen to it. It always is a mistake. I didn't listen to my feeling. And that's the spine of the scene. We're going to come back to that. That's going to be what we recall. That's the end of Act 1. Grace goes, okay. Grace sits down and says, I'm going to mentor you as your older, more experienced mentor. So listen, I know you're not asking for advice, and by saying this, I'm not saying I know more than you. It's just an observation, having been at this a lot longer than you have. And she pulls out a deck of cards to play cards with her, and the cards are to distract her from the pictures of the rape case around, and to get back to, like, you got to get back to life a little bit here, you know? Yeah, the work's important, but if you let it be the most important thing in your life, you're going to find yourself in trouble. I know in the thick of things, it can feel unnatural to step away, but it's a survival skill. It doesn't make you a bad cop. So Grace is saying, and scene, if we ended there, Grace is going, look, you're doing your job, I get it, but you got to have survival skills, man. You got to take care of yourself. So this becomes survival over justice. That's the two conversations. So Karen goes, I'm the kind of person who stays till the end of the party. It may not be healthy, but it's how I do the job. And then she sits down, and then they start to play cards. And then Karen goes, what? And Grace is like, nothing, it's gin. I'm just waiting for you to draw a card. Karen puts her card in order, and then we have monologue. So here's a monologue within the scene. So we soliloquy, talking to a crowd, and then this is, which I was going to show you Jeff Daniels, but we're not going to have time. You should go study Jeff Daniels in the newsroom. And this is a monologue within a scene, and it's a retrospective historical monologue. My first year on the job, I got called out to domestic disturbance. So you go, oh my God, it's a memory monologue. So now we have, the traps are, right? Know who you're talking to, why you're speaking, and then work off of them moment to moment. Make sure that you don't fall into, I'm just speaking. In this scene, which is a scene monologue, it could easily fall into, I'm just speaking to myself. I'm what's our words? Reflecting, ruminating, right? My first year in the job, I got called out to a domestic disturbance in Eaglewood, nice little Tudor house where the husband had just beat the lights out of his wife. There's blood gushing from her nose and her eyes flown shut. So we arrested the guy, and I tried to send the woman to the hospital, but she wouldn't go. So the paramedics patched her up, and then we left, and it didn't feel right. So I made a mental note to go back later and check on her. So I finished my shift. I head back to the station, and all the guys are wanting me to go out for a beer. And I tried saying no, but you know how that goes. I'm just going to read this flat, just so I want you guys to read it. It's, come on, Duval, don't be a lame ass, all that nonsense. So I caved. I went, and I was a good sport. And I guess what? While I was out having my beer with the fellas, the guy made bail. He went back home, and he finished what he started. He shattered her leg, and he fractured her skull, and he left her with permanent brain damage. So when I hear that little voice inside me saying, don't go home yet, I pay attention. There's the recall of the premise. We think we have McCarthy, and it looks like we have him. McCarthy is the rapist that they've been chasing down. This is a true story, by the way. It's a hell of a TV show. But you know as well as I do, a million things can go wrong between where we are now and where we want to be. End of monologue. That's a hell of a monologue. And then, anyway, gin. Well, fuck me. One more. Now my little voice is saying if I go home now and get maybe 6 hours of sleep, recall. At least eat something. Yeah, coffee is not a food group. Yes, ma'am. And Grace leaves, and she's left haunted. So Karen wins the scene because Karen teaches Grace, no, I'm not going home. I'm not going back to my children. And I'm not going to rest until I solve this case, because my little voice is saying we're missing something and we got to get this guy. Whereas Grace, so that's justice. I have to fight for justice. Whereas Grace is going, dude, you got to take care of yourself. Like, get some sleep, eat something, you know? And so they're having a mentor apprentice kind of relationship in which the young Padawan is out working the Jedi because she cares so much about it, right? And in the middle is this massive monologue, which is there once was a time when monologue, which on so many people could die, just die. Except for that, we go back to the two conversations and the point. And the point of it is she's teaching her mentor why why the mentor is wrong and why she has to deliver justice. And so I'm talking about a past situation over here. It's one of these, and a lot of history monologues like this. Look over here, you hear that, you see that, and hit you over here. That's why. So the entire history monologue is not a historical monologue. It's a present tense affecting change in the woman in front of her. She needs to teach her a story so that she can then sell the story. So when I hear that little voice inside of me saying, "Don't go home yet, I pay attention," is the punchline. And it literally punches Grace in the face. All this history is in order to get to that point. So there's a drive in the monologue to the end. And the counterpoint is she is sacrificing her life. She is giving up her daughters. So all while affecting change in Grace, she's also telling herself, justifying to herself why she's being a good cop but a shitty mom. Y'all understand? So it's the same scene analysis. If you're doing this monologue, there's Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3 of the monologue. It's actually broken that way. This is Act 1. There's Act 2. Well, look, my first year on the job, blah. So I finished my shift, blah. We think we have them, but we don't. So there's a 3-act structure written on the page, right? There's two conversations, survival versus justice. There's an active objective. I'm going to make my mentor see that she's wrong. I have to do my job, right? Despite the fact that I'm sacrificing my children, which is why the scene starts with, "Don't you have a couple of kids waiting to be tucked in?" And the actions throughout the whole thing are to lead her down the path so that I can close the case. So it's all the exact same scene analysis, and you have to keep it as active as you possibly can, because if it doesn't stay active, it doesn't have an objective towards Grace, it'll become just a retrospective, boring monologue about somebody talking about their past, which I've seen it done that way. I'm gonna show you the whole damn scene. Why not do that? Okay, you guys. Oh my God, I love Mary Weaver so much. Okay, hang on. Don't talk to you. Just so you can, I'll show you the whole scene so you can hear that.
First year on the
it's
job.
a monologue, but you don't even realize it's a monologue until it comes.
I got them to sleep.
Hang on.
I knew that.
Merritt Weaver is extraordinary. Isn't she extraordinary? Tony Collette's great. Merritt Weaver is extraordinary. Okay, so to conclude, right? There's no tricks to monologue. Monologue scene analysis like any other scene analysis. And in that scene, you go, okay, good. What are the two themes? What's the A and B conversation? So justice and survival. And then you go, okay, what's the circumstances? What's the backstory, forestory? And then you know about the children, and you know that they're going to catch the guy, but and you figure out all the circumstances. And then you go, what's the objective? My objective is to make or get the other person do whatever it is. And in this case, it's to, like, you know, teach the teacher that you need to, like, stay vigilant, or bad guys will get away with their violence. And then circumstances, objective, relationship, who is the other person? And you can see the relationship is so clear in that. It's like the teacher and the taught, you know, the mentor and the apprentice, where the apprentice is now teaching the teacher. And then you go, okay, what's the counterpoint? And the counterpoint is flaring the cost of her justice, the cost of her cause to her family. And then you go, okay, so A over B, CO are the counterpoint. And then you go, okay, so what's the arc? Well, the arc is the monologue is the second act, and there's a 3-act structure in that monologue, and it's setting up the past, using it against her, and then making it present. And you can see the construction of the flow chart of the architecture of that, and then you can see her working realizations and decisions and moment to moment off of Toni Collette. And if it's a monologue where you're in a scene and you happen to be the one speaking, it's simply dialogue in which you're just the one who's speaking and you're still working off the other person. If it's a speech to a group of people or in the theater, then you do the exact same thing, but you're doing it to the group. If it's to yourself in a soliloquy, you have to figure out which part of you you're speaking to, have an image for that, and then do the same thing. And so there's no cheating in a monologue. It's the exact same work as any scene. And also, you have to be acutely aware of the fact that you need to know who you're speaking to, and acutely aware of the fact that you know what the moments are back and forward. And you have to make sure that it's as active as possible, because sometimes when it's only you're the one who's talking, there's more chance, there's more possibility of you as the actor tripping yourselves into insecurity and your fear and your shame and your actor voice showing up. And so you need to make sure that you're doing your work as tight as possible. And so it comes back down to my premise of acting, which is it is or it isn't. An actor who does their homework in a talky scene and knows how to do their homework in a Shakespearean soliloquy and knows how to do their homework in like Jeff Daniels in the opening of the Newsroom, where it's like a 5-minute speech. They do the homework as the same. And if you do all of your homework, then you won't think and you won't trip and you won't bring yourself into it. An actor who allows gaps in their work can kind of get away with it sometimes in a drama when there's like really lots of fast talking, but when they have a monologue, their work falls apart because they haven't done the construction of the work enough. And so the answer is know who you're speaking to, why you're saying it, and make sure you're working off of them, no matter what it is, whether it's a song, a poem, animation voiceover, Shakespeare, Sondheim, Sorkin, or the television series. Yeah. That's how you approach monologues. Questions, answers, anything? Questions, answers, comments? It's been half an hour over time, so we're going to wrap up. But that is approaching a monologue. Isn't that a gorgeous scene? Yeah. Hope that helps. Good luck with them. Practice them. Put them up on the. Bilal, I owe you. I saw you're on the scene on the study hall. I owe you a critique on the study hall. I will get to it. Practice your monologues and put them on the study hall, and then we'll work together. Where do we find what? If you're looking for monologues, there are monologues on the resources page that you can work from. You can put your monologues, you can act them and put them on the study hall, and then I can study them and give you critique. On the assignments page, there's a couple of examples of breaking down monologues. I'll put a couple more up. Yeah, practice, and keep watching them. There's a whole pile we didn't get to because we were so far over time already. Do go watch Jeff Daniels in the Newsroom. Watch Meg Ryan in When a Man Loves a Woman. Watch Mark Rylance in Anything. Oh, you did, Monty? Great. Okay, I'm so sorry. I'm a couple behind. I will get those taken care of. This weekend I'll send you some notes. Yeah, watch Mark Rylance in almost anything. And look at scenes where there are monologues, like in Moonstruck or anything by Shanley, and then go and then watch them done and study how the actors are doing them. But again, if it's a theater monologue audition where you're looking at a spot on the wall, you have to use more imagination of creating the scene, but it's still the same analysis. It's still the same approach. It's just you're more acutely aware of the fact that if you don't do that work, it's going to fall apart. Yeah. Good. Nice read, Jim. That was very fun. Okay, everybody. Have a fantastic weekend. Maybe some of you I'll see on the talk tomorrow with the Australian casting director. And otherwise, we will see you in class Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or at the next webinar. Yeah? Bye, everybody. Take care. Enjoy. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.